Hi, my name is Matthew Johnston. I'm an MBACP-accredited psychotherapist. I work with individuals and couples, psychotherapeutically creating a space within which both parties can be heard and understood. I specialise in communication, infidelity, trust issues, premarital counselling, and attachment style. I also lead online programs designed to support individuals and couples improve their circumstances and make the necessary changes to improve their lives. Today, I'm going to talk about cultural competency, couples therapy, and the experience of Black and brown people in therapy. I have a strange relationship with the idea of cultural competency. It's something that ideally, your mental health practitioner would be able to demonstrate a ability to appreciate and work with people from diverse backgrounds and have enough of a competency around what that might entail. The problem that I've got with that idea is that there are cultural competency courses that people go on and then they're qualified to talk to people from very different backgrounds to them. If I think about my own experience, I consider myself to be a relatively culturally competent practitioner. But what it's taken me to get to a point where I can sit down and talk with someone from a different background to me and have enough in common, have enough of a fundamental understanding of their experience to work with them in such a way that I'm not having to ask them to explain very much. I'm not struggling with their accent. I'm not struggling with their points of references. That's taken my whole life to learn all the stuff I've had to learn, to be around all the different people that I've been around over the course of my life, to be interested in all the different cultural things that I've been interested in that have helped me learn stuff about people from other backgrounds. It took my whole life to get to this point. And I don't know everything about everyone. What I know is still very limited in comparison to what could be known about all the different sorts of people in the world. So whilst I haven't been on a cultural competency course myself, I feel so comfortable, I'm so confident talking with people from different backgrounds because of a lifelong learning experience. And I think it's very difficult to squeeze that into like a day's worth of, or 2 days worth of a cultural competency course. Look, if you're a white mental health practitioner and you work with the NHS or some counselling service in a large city, Birmingham, Manchester, London, you're likely to end up working with people from a very different background to you. So it's very important that you can do that and that the quality of service that you're able to offer to people from Black and brown backgrounds is the same as the quality of service you're able to offer to white people. That's incredibly important. So it is an important thing. I think it's just a very difficult thing to genuinely establish. There's an assumption that relationships should be good and they should work and they should last for as long as they last. Because it's an assumption, and there are people that kind of believe differently and will have series of relationships throughout their lives and not commit to one person for a very long time. It's a hard thing. It's a very hard thing to do, to commit to one person for the rest of your life. So why am I so convicted in supporting people to do it? Because I think there's a lot on offer to us as individuals if we're able to establish a healthy experience with love, a healthy experience in being supported by a partner, in having a partnership with somebody. Because if you're in partnership with someone throughout life, whether or not you have a family or whatever, there's so much good that could come of having someone that's along the ride for you, that knows you inside and out, that's been along your life journey with you, that's seen the different ways in which you've developed over time and you've seen their development. And it's a very romantic idea. It's a nice idea. And I think people survive longer. Their happiness certainly survives longer if they're in a healthy, happy relationship. Men certainly survive longer when they are married, as opposed to when they're on their own, because men left to their own devices do very silly things and die sooner. And so yes, in general, I think it's a positive thing for mental health if you want to commit to a long-term relationship. But it's hard. Divorce is a very, 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 very common occurrence. That means lots of us come from single parent households, and so lots of us don't have the experience of parents that have stayed together and made it work. And we're born into a society that still kind of encourages us to get married and stay together. And so battling against our life experiences and what's kind of expected of us in society, and kind of what we want in terms of this idealistic view of love and romance and the future. And so I enjoy supporting couples to try to reach those goals of being able to have a stable family, have a stable marriage, have a stable relationship, be in love with each other, fall in love with each other again, learn to love the different versions of each other as they get older and as life changes. It can be a very beautiful thing. Often, people from black and brown backgrounds are contending with quite a lot when it comes to having a stable relationship with each other. Not only do they have to contend with what I think most people from most backgrounds contend with in terms of the divorce rate and generational differences between the way our parents and grandparents used to do things and the way we do things now. Black and brown people contend with higher levels of insecurity as individuals. The experience of a black woman in this country in terms of feeling beautiful is very difficult. The world still tells black women that they are the most unattractive women in the world. Not only does it have a very detrimental impact on black girls and black women, it also has a terrible detrimental effect on the way that black men see black women, the way that men see black women in general. At best, black women get fetishized. At worst, they're relegated to being sort of untouchable. And in order to counteract that, black girls and black women find themselves under pressure to adhere to Eurocentric standards of beauty. And when they're able to reach whatever version of themselves they feel fits in with the beauty standards around them, then there's been so much emphasis on their appearance that it becomes their primary value, or it seems to become their primary value, and they get treated as such. You hear a lot of guys talk about wanting submissive partners, and what that's code for is that I want a beautiful person that doesn't say very much and cooks. um, but obviously, all women are more than that. And we also live in a society that encourages everyone, men and women, to be something, to have a career, to make money, to da 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 da. And so let's say you're a black woman going through all of that, trying to find the right partner that's going to love you and respect you. What do you do? Do you wait for Prince Charming that's not an asshole, that's not talking to you about being submissive, that's not clearly an untrustworthy person? Or do you settle for the person that's most financially stable, or who also fits some sort of negative stereotype of what a man ought to do and be? It's hard to know what to do in those circumstances, because it's hard to know, like, what's actually realistic. Like, is it realistic to have this perfect man that loves you no matter what you look like, no matter what you do, like doesn't have any specific expectations over what your gender role is? And like, does he exist, or are you just surrounded by people with very rigid views on what women should look like and do and think and say and be, and you've got to just pick the best out of that bunch? Like, it's not obvious, like, what's real and what's not. And depending on the circles that you are in, or the communities that you're in, or the areas in the country that you live, you might be surrounded by this negative sort of man, and not really believe in any other sort of man. It's a tough experience. And then you meet someone eventually who at least presents themselves as, no, I'm good. I'm good. Like, so I'm not like them. And you believe that they're not like them. And maybe they're not exactly like them, but maybe they've got their own shit going on, or maybe they kind of, you go on their phone and they're on Instagram chatting to somebody else, and it's like, oh, what does this mean? What do you do? Do you run? Do you say, we're done? Do you hold it against them? Do you not run, but you hold it against them? Like, you're a liar. All men are liars. I knew it. Now our relationship is, I'm in a relationship with a liar because men are liars, but at least I'm in a relationship and this is it. And so now you're both miserable, like, forever. There's all sorts of things that go on in the world that people from black and brown backgrounds have to deal with before they try to enter a relationship. So they're carrying all this stuff. Then they're trying to have a healthy relationship with someone else that's also carrying all the stuff that comes with being whoever it is they are. Man, therapy is useful for, like, working some of that out and understanding the context in which you're trying to have this functional relationship, and trying to bring children into, trying to get married and have kids because that's the expectation. And so you do that, then you've got kids, but like, and all of a sudden you're an example for someone looking at you thinking that what you do is the right thing to do. So yeah, I think it's important for black and brown people to have relationship therapy or therapy full stop. Because a lot of us don't even know half this stuff that we are carrying and processing and dealing with, and like anger issues, for example, like the angry black person idea. What are we angry about? Like, maybe we don't know, but like, if we look at, okay, what are all the things in life that kind of upset you or kind of rub you the wrong way? How many of those are there, and how often do you experience them? It's like, well, I got followed around the shop by a security guard again the other day, and the police stopped me the other day. And when an old white lady's on the same side of the street as me, I crossed over because I didn't want her to think I was going to rob her. Like, that's some daily stuff that it just accumulates over time. Or I was getting ready and my hair was natural, and I felt like really insecure, so I was like 2 hours late because I had to change my hairstyle because I just didn't, I wanted to feel more comfortable going outside. These sorts of things bring you closer and closer to the edge of what you're able to cope with. And then someone says the wrong thing to you and you explode, and you're an angry black person. And maybe you're angry with each other in a relationship. Maybe you just fight like cat and dog because the world has pissed you off, and you can't also deal with being in a relationship with someone that has different ideas to you, sees things in different ways you, has different wants and needs, and it's just too much. It's just too much. How are we supposed to like cope with all the shit that the world throws at us, and then cope with being in a relationship with someone of usually of the opposite gender, and that's in and of itself a challenge. And so it's like it's a lot for any couple to deal with, but particularly couples from ethnic minority backgrounds that have that extra amount of stuff to contend with in life. I don't think it's unusual for psychotherapists to have a caseload that's got a large proportion of people that are coming to therapy for the first time. I think psychotherapy is becoming more and more of an acceptable idea to people. It's becoming certainly more accessible. And so more and more people are accessing psychotherapy. So I think a psychotherapist experience is one of having lots of people for the first time. What I think makes it that much more harder for people from black and brown backgrounds. First of all, there are cultural sort of stigmas. So there are outdated ideas around what it means to be struggling with your mental health, outdated ideas around like what's actually going on. Like, people might think the devil is taking you over, and like there's like these kind of old-fashioned views on what we might now describe as being bipolar or being depressed or whatever. You've got all that to contend with. So you've got like maybe a cultural sort of frame of reference that doesn't accommodate for the idea of just needing to go and talk to a psychotherapist. And then if you're part of a community that has those stigmas, then you're unlikely to have seen anyone else go for psychotherapy. And so it's an alien concept, it's an alien thing. You're likely to be the first person in the history of the family that's ever gone and seen a psychotherapist. And so that's daunting in and of itself. You might be at risk of negative judgment from your friends, from your family, who might think you've lost the plot, you're crazy, whatever. And so there's that to worry about. Here's a thought experiment to kind of illustrate that point a little bit more. If I said to you, I had a client yesterday, it was a young woman that was suffering with bulimia. What does that young woman look like in your head? The answer, I think for most people, is that that's a young white woman. That's the first young white woman. If I saw a young man yesterday struggling with suicidal thoughts, it's usually a young white guy. And so what white people have that black and brown people don't have on their side are these negative stereotypes of who's likely to be suffering with these things. But it's not an outrageous idea that you would be suffering with that. And so you can approach, as a white person, you can approach a psychotherapist and say the words, I think I'm anorexic or I'm suffering with bulimia, because it's not a strange set of words to string together in a sentence for you, because there is this stereotype that someone like you goes through something like that. What does a black woman look like that suffers with anorexia or bulimia? Like, what's the stereotype around that? We have other stereotypes. If I spoke to a young man that was negatively impacted by knife crime, what does he look like? Doesn't look the same as the guy that was suicidal. I think that's a factor that plays a part in the difference between the experience of a white person for the first time going to therapy in comparison to a black person. You have these stereotypes that make it more of an accessible idea. Also, in terms of kind of stereotypes and imagery, the reason those stereotypes exist is because we have media, We have programs and films in which you see these ideas. You see the suicidal young man. You see the young girls suffering with depression or anxiety. Or you see it on sitcoms and programs and soap operas and other. You've seen it somewhere. That's why you have it in your head. What we see, what black people see in particular, we see slave films. And like, if we do see a black person suffering with mental health issues, they're in a straitjacket. They're schizophrenic. They are on the extreme end, and they've probably got a drug addiction and a criminal record. Just to throw that in there as well, that doesn't help. That really doesn't help, because you don't want to be thrown into that same category. And then there's the fact that the field of psychotherapy is predominantly white. And so for a black person using the NHS or using a counselling service, the likelihood that you end up in front of a white counsellor is quite high, which is also another barrier, because will they understand me? Won't they understand me? Will they judge me? Are they racist? These are things that white people don't necessarily have to worry about, whether or not their therapist might be like secretly racist. Then there's the fear of judgment. It's like fear of judgment that's associated with being in front of somebody that might not understand you. And you might worry that they might think you're just an angry black person, for example. But then there's the fear of like, well, what happens if I go with someone from my own community, like severely judges me because maybe they're a doctor, maybe they're a psychologist or a psychotherapist, because they expected to be treating white people, because white people are the people that have these problems, and we're the doctors, we're not the clients, and so it's not even like a guarantee that being in front of someone that looks like you is going to be a good thing, like especially if they're a lot older than you and from a generation that you is judgmental. That is also a scary kind of prospect. And so like we don't like it's having the limited choice we have in the mental health practitioners from our own communities can also be a difficult thing to navigate. Over the course of my career, I started off working with children. I was a youth worker before I was a psychotherapist. And then I became a psychotherapist. But even then, I started off working in schools with primary and secondary school age children. And one of the very common themes was that a lot of children came from single parent background, and that had a negative impact on them in various ways. I moved up from working in schools to working in universities, where my clients were now like 18 and above. But still, one of the prevalent issues was coming from single parent structures. You could still see the negative impact that's had. And as kind of young adults, they're only just able to start looking back and really understanding what their experiences were like and how they impacted them. With the kids, like, there was obviously something wrong. You could see it in their behavior, but they didn't know like why, what was going on. With the young adults, their eyes are beginning to open. They're beginning to question things, beginning to process stuff. And then as I moved into private practice and I start working with adults beyond kind of university age, especially people that are getting into relationships, long-term serious relationships, or thinking about getting married or thinking about having families. Again, the theme of what they learned from their parents, what the impact was of their parents splitting up on their sense of how to be in a long-term relationship, how to be a parent, what marriage is supposed to look like, how long it's supposed to last, comes up. And so throughout the course of my entire career, this has been this common like theme that dysfunctional family structures or family structures that break down have these far-reaching negative consequences. And so now I find myself in a point in my career where I'm increasingly more and more often speaking with young, often black and brown couples that are trying to make it work. Sometimes they're considering breaking up. Sometimes they're considering their options, or they're considering starting a family, but there are things wrong in their relationship, or they're considering getting married, but there are things wrong in their relationship, or they've just got married and then someone realizes that somebody was cheating or whatever it was. And like, I'm dealing with people at the very beginning of what might potentially end up being a long-term relationship that may end up in them having children. I can't ignore what I know about how important it is to get it right. If you're going to try to do it, if you're going to try to start a family, if you're going to try to get married and have a healthy relationship, I let people know about my experience. I let people know about what I've learned, about what goes wrong if that doesn't work. And I try to support couples to make the healthiest choices they can, to develop as many skills as they possibly can develop, to really take seriously the prospect of what they're doing and make a clear decision as to how they want to do it. or if they want to do it. As far as I can tell, the world would probably be a better place if more families were able to stay together in a healthy way. I try to do my part in helping that happen. Hi, my name is Matthew Johnston. I'm an MBACP-accredited psychotherapist. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Matthew Therapy and on my website www.mjtherapy.co.uk. This video was made in collaboration with MindFriend. They're an educational digital platform combating misinformation of mental health through accredited professionals. See you in the next video.